First thing, take the magazine out. Make sure the chamber is clear. Put it on safe.
Show how to clear the chamber.
Okay. You just flip this, you just pull this little lever back here. There's a little hook here. You squeeze that, that releases it. And then you pull it back and just visually check and make sure there's nothing in it. Then you put it on safe. Take her sling off. And you push this pin right here. The one in the back. Just give it a push. Pull it up. And then rotate the upper and lower receiver. Just a little bit. And then we take this thing here. And you give your front takedown pin a little tap. Flip it over. Pull that. Separate your lower receiver from your upper receiver. Okay, the lower receiver requires very little maintenance, but I'll show you how you take the buffer spring out. This only has to be done maybe every 500 rounds. It doesn't have to be done very often. But you push this is spring loaded. When your shell fires, this bolt slides all the way back and pushes on this big spring, which has got a buffer on it. So you just hold that in with your finger. Push this little plunger down. That releases the buffer. Then you hold down on your hammer and wiggle this a little. And it'll come right out of there. Like I say, this doesn't have to be done very often. And you just wiggle it. That's your recoil spring and your buffer assembly. And to get it back in there,
you clean that?
Yep, you take a clean patch and you put it on the end of your cleaning rod and you clean it out and then re-lubricate it. It doesn't need a whole lot of lubricant, just a thin coat. And then to get it back in, you just push it. And then this lower receiver assembly, and always make sure you never dry fire it when the receivers are taken apart. So that's the idea in putting it on safety as soon as you clear the chamber. So if you accidentally pull the trigger, it won't drop the hammer without the receivers disassembled. And then this thing here, you lubricate this, you can put a lot in there. You can't over lubricate the lower receiver assembly. So what I do is I take a rag and I stick it in the trigger guard here like this, and I just put a bunch of lube in there and let it set aside for while you're cleaning the rest of it. By the time you're done, the excess will all be on your rag instead of dripping all over here. So this here, we just set it aside for now. And then the upper. You pull this, that's your charging handle. That pulls your bolt out. And we'll set the bolt aside. That's the whole bolt assembly. And then your charging handle, you pull it almost all the way out and you'll feel a notch. When you find that notch, you drop it straight down and pull it straight out. And then, this is a tool I made. On Bushmaster rifles, the bores are chrome lined, so you don't need to keep oil in the bore. You can clean them and then run a clean patch through it, and you don't have to worry about them rusting because they're chrome lined. But I keep oil in them anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and run a dry patch through here, so that way when you want to shoot it, it'll be ready. And you always want to clean them like this. You push your cleaning rod in there, let it come out the back. And you want to get, I got two different kinds of patches. I got some in your gun case there. But to clean them, you want one of these little thin, because you want to get the proper fit. If they're too tight, you can't pull them through. If they're too loose, they don't do any good. So I put a real thin butterfly patch and a 22 caliber patch together. That's how I do it when I'm cleaning it.
Is there a size for the butterfly patch? Or
yeah, just 22 caliber butterfly patches. So what you want, you can kind of tell by looking. This is just to get the excess oil out of there, and it doesn't need to be real tight. So, you know, you can tell that one's coming through there. Too easy to pull any fouling out. So, and then you want to always make sure before you shoot it, you want to make sure your chamber and the chamber is where the cartridge fits in. You want to make sure the barrel and the chamber are completely dry of oil. That goes with any gun, especially semi-automatic, because it's like sticking your boot in the mud. If you got oil in the chamber, it creates a suction and it doesn't allow it to extract properly. It causes undue stresses on the extractor and the bolt assembly. So just, you know, make sure you don't have, it doesn't have to be, I mean, like clean it out with a solvent or anything like that, but you want to just put a dry patch through it and make sure there's no excess oil. That's all you're worried about, is excess oil. And then I made this little thing because sometimes after you clean them, oil will puddle up. This is the hardest part to clean on one of these locking lugs. But if you use the right ammo, they don't need to be clean. But right in here you can see that the excess will go down into this between the locking lugs and the chamber. So I made this little thing out of a coat hanger just to get the excess lubricant out of it. So in case, you know, you're carrying it with the muzzle pointed down, which you should, that it doesn't, oil doesn't drip from in those locking lugs down into the chamber. So this is, and I just stick it down in there, just work it around, and it'll take any excess lubricant out of there. It's not that big a deal, but it's just something that I'm kind of picky about. Okay. Now, after you pull about 3 of these butterfly patches with a regular patch, and you always want to oil them before you pull them through. You put some oil, you know, heavily oil the patches, pull about 3 patches through, and then you pull one of these through, and I got all this stuff is in your case there, and then you push a rod back in there, because the patches will only take out the light fouling. You push this in through there, and you take this slotted end off, and you replace it with this
Can I
end.
see it? Get a close up on
Yeah, that's your bore brush. That cleans out the rifling, which this doesn't do real well.
I've seen them before.
Yeah. So in other words, and then you pull that through there, and then you go back to your regular patches, and basically you just use lubricated patches until they come out clean. And then you run a dry patch through there when you're done. You run a dry patch through the bore and then into the chamber from this end. So this is already clean, so there's no use in going through all that. Okay, now we'll take the bolt assembly apart. This here can go back in. So you push this in here, and you'll feel a notch, and it'll slip right up in there. Then you push it part way in like that. Okay, let's set this aside and bring the bolt assembly up here, because this is the most critical part here, is making sure your bolt assembly is put back together properly.
What makes this an assault rifle?
Nothing. They're not considered a true assault rifle is selective fire. These are just a semi-automatic rifle is what they are. A true assault rifle has selective fire capability, semi-auto and full auto. These are not assault rifles. That's what some people, anti-gun people, like to call them as assault rifles, but they're not a true assault rifle because they don't have the selective fire capability. Okay.
You have to pull the trigger every time.
Yeah, Okay, now the bolt assembly, you push this little cotter key right here, and what that does is hold the firing pin in to keep it from falling out. So you take your ink pen, you push that like that, and you pull that little cotter pin out. And then you turn it upside down, let your firing pin drop out, and then you push this in. This will